Sorry about that, everyone. So, welcome back to the podcast. I'm Adrian Lloyd. This is just my stupid opinion. And as I was saying, that none of you could hear me, is that over the last little bit, I've been focusing a lot on the immigration situation that has been facing our country. Once again, sorry for the new mistake. So what we've been seeing a lot of immigration over the last few years throughout Europe and Canada, and it's actually kind of surprising how much immigration, like how much more we've seen underneath the Trudeau government. It was just from Harper to Trudeau, it was a huge spike that we've seen. This has been both in regular immigration and in illegal immigration. So so what I've been as I was saying before when nobody could hear me is that I've been kind of researching this over a little bit, and I've been noticing that it's not as cut and dry as we like to think it is. It's not so much that it's just there's war or something's going on in other countries that's causing people to run away from their countries to our own nations, but it's actually a lot of people that are pulling the strings from behind the scenes. And there's a few reasons for this. This is what has become known as migration warfare. And the idea is to flood a country with enough people to cause conflict amongst everybody that's there. And this can be done for a couple different reasons. One reason that can be done is lower cost of labor. You bring in more people, you can lower the wages. There are also immigrants coming from other countries will increasingly accept less benefits, less pay for the same jobs. But another one that I've been thinking about a lot lately has to do with the idea that that there's people who are using their wealth and their non-government organizations and their foundations in order to flood our countries with mass immigration. And this can be also because they are doing it to try and get away with their own political agenda, keep the people fighting amongst themselves, so that way we're not paying attention to anything that's going on. But there's also other reasons to do it. It can also be used to undermine a society, to sort of collapse it from within. And when you collapse a society from within, these people who have the wealth and have the power, they can then sort of come on top of the ashes. So it's sort of you burn down the kingdom to be king of the ashes, as a sort of example. And what really put me on this path was actually this Friday. I was browsing Twitter when I came across this tweet that you can see here. And this woman, Jamie, said, "Can some fucking Canadian media blast this story across all the country, please?" Now, clearly you cannot see it. The tweet has been made unavailable, but it has been archived. And when I saw this was quite startling to me. Now, this actually doesn't have anything to do with, in and of itself, mass migration, but it has to do with immigration tourism. Baby tourism, as it's called. So the tweet ended up getting archived, and I have it right here. And it's from this person. Are you a Nigerian living in Nigeria? Are you considering having your babies in Canada? Please read this thread. And the whole thread is just explaining how you can do this, how you can get away with this birth tourism, and what are here right down here. What are the reasons for it? Dual citizenship, travel without visa restrictions, access to better quality of education, better healthcare facilities. You leave your kids with a choice. It's saying. So this alone is just the idea of it is pretty concerning, because there's not a lot of countries that actually give citizenship based on that give citizenship based on just your birth. But Canada is one of them, and so is the U.S. And many people are using this in order to try and get through the loopholes and be able to have their kids here and then gain access to everything that our country has to offer. So there's a few different tweets that are put out about this. It says, after 2 years of numerous consultation, I finally penned down my baby in Canada's experience, which I think a lot of people can learn from. I've helped over 30 mums to be over the past 2 years. A lot of people aren't aware that it is cheaper than the U.S. and your baby gets Canadian passport too. Schools in Canada are way cheaper than the U.S. Plus healthcare is absolutely free. Which, no, it's not. You have to pay it through your taxes. But my guess is this is not exactly a person who's going through about it quite so legally. That's just my guess, though. Neraland is an amazing resource and it helped me a great deal. The first hospital I visited charged me $670 Canadian per visit. I went to the forum and realized the hospital people were paying $100 Canadian for their hospital visits. Left that hospital in a heartbeat. And then going into it says, my experience is detailed in the blog and it's two parts. And this is what they do. So there's a good reason why this post ended up getting deleted. It got deleted because it ended up getting deleted because clearly a lot of people, a lot of Canadians wouldn't be happy about this. They really would not be happy that the idea that you're coming in, taking advantage of the resources and the taxpayer funded healthcare, that you're taking advantage of it, and you're also going through the loopholes in order to get into our country. When especially when there's plenty of people who go through it in the proper ways, and they sometimes have to wait years in order to get a Canadian citizenship or get a proper visa. In fact, just last year, when in the place I used to work, I had a guy, a buddy there who worked there. He was a British dude. This guy was having a bitch of a time getting a Canadian visa. A British dude, but he was just constantly the immigration was giving him a hard time. They actually, for a while, he thought he was going to have to get. He was going to have to go home back to England for a little while and then reapply for a visa to come back. He actually had to stop working for a little bit because his working visa expired and he couldn't get it renewed in time because they were just giving him a hard time about him. In the end, he'd been dating a Canadian girl for some time, so they ended up getting married. So things worked out for him, but he still actually had to stop working for I think about 3-4 months during that time just because he wouldn't have been legally able to anymore. So there's a lot of reasons that people would be pissed off about this and why it got deleted. But I decided that I was going to check out this blog that they were talking about in order to see what exactly this person was talking about, what this person is making reference to. And it seems like this whole blog it's kind of dedicated to sort of a lot of African affairs, African news, especially in Nigeria or Rwanda, that area there. But she did, this person, I'm pretty sure it's a she. They ended up having their two blogs that they were talking about where they kind of do explain how they got into Canada, how they got their passport for their baby. So this is NijaNomads.com. And why have your baby in Canada? Having your baby abroad, aka birth tourism, is getting increasingly popular among Nigerian families, and these days it's almost a necessity. I remember my first hospital visit, my doctor in Nigeria, and the first question asked is, what state in the U.S. are you going to have your baby? The question wasn't, are you having a baby in the U.S.? What made me wonder if anyone in their babies had their babies in Nigeria anymore. I let them know U.S. wasn't the option for me, and the reason they list out a couple of the big ones is Canada offers more benefits to its citizens, immigration policies are better, free healthcare plus college education is cheaper. Canada is cheaper to have your baby. Sometimes this really depends on the state of the U.S. you'll be having your baby in. But here's a few of the reasons. In the second blog, it's talking about how to get your passport, your baby their passport, how to get them their social insurance number. And this idea of birth tourism to me is just an absolute kind of disgusting one. But the thing is, too, is the whole idea of birth tourism is the fact that you're actually it actually has more to do with not so much getting yourself the citizenship, but get your baby the citizenship, get them the access to the resources that they want. But it is actually the first step in what is called, I believe it's called anchor immigration, which is you have a family member living in a country who gets in there, gets their visas or maybe their citizenship, and then they can start bringing over a bunch of their family members because of it. So this is sort of the idea of it, and this has been outlined in a couple different articles, actually. I mean, in this McLean one, they even kind of bring this up. They talk about how birth tourism is legal, and despite common misconceptions, simply being a parent and child born here is not enough to land permanent residency visas for a prolonged length of time. However, the thing about that is that you definitely will have a much more easy time of getting a residency here in Canada and also a citizenship if you have a child that is considered Canadian, if you come here and give birth. And this is a rising problem. Even doctors have been talking about this too. I'm just sort of breaking into the whole subject right now. But But in the okay, here this area right here. Some people are from poor, crime-ridden countries who want to provide security for their children and hope that Canadian babies can provide an anchor in the country for the rest of the family. And so that's the very important part where it's talking about the anchor into the country. This is why people want to do away with the idea of anchor immigration, because it's just another means of mass immigration. So that was one way that I started getting onto this subject. And as I was looking into it more and more, it became more concerning just because in Canada, the number one, the numbers that we have that are the number of people that we have that are coming into our country, but also the things that a lot of people, whether they be refugees or new immigrants, what they are trying to claim and what they want as what they see as their right now that they're in the country. Apparently, letting them into the country isn't quite enough. Such as, here we go. This one actually is quite a much more recent article. I'm just getting her set up. Yeah, this one came out on September 27th from the CBC. Asylum seekers file a human rights complaint over lack of access to Quebec subsidized daycare. Without access to advanced tax credit or CPE, claimants say they'll have to stay home and take care of their children. 2 asylum seekers have filed a complaint with the Quebec Human Rights and Youth Rights Commission after being denied access to subsidized daycare. They say it prevents them from entering the workforce and beginning their lives in the province. Vladimir Mathieu came to Montreal from Haiti in June 2017 and is still waiting for his refugee status to be approved. While his daughter has a place in a Centre de la Petite Enfance, his son, who was born in Canada, was denied a spot by the same daycare. That's because Quebec Family Ministry clarified their regulations in April, saying only those with refugee status can get a spot. A spokesperson for the ministry told CBC News that some information that could have caused confusion was circulating before that date. But it's this idea that a number of these people who have come into our country, and they haven't exactly said how. They say it's asylum seeker, but I'm pretty sure that this would be one of the people that crossed our borders illegally at Roxham Road, and now they're trying to claim that they have a right to subsidized daycare. But this is after they've been most likely receiving their welfare checks. They've been receiving government assistance when it comes to their housing. And there's plenty of other areas where immigrants actually get a lot of help, especially if you're considered an asylum seeker. You get a lot of help. In comparison to the average Canadian, I would say. But the immigration numbers that we're facing has been getting to a tipping point. That's actually not even me saying that, but that's coming from even some experts that are talking about how dangerous it is. I mean, not too long ago, we were hearing about how Ahmed Hussein, the immigration minister, he was even despite the fact he was going after Lisa MacLeod and telling her that she was un-Canadian for fear-mongering. Despite that, he was one of the people that was he even felt this way himself, because in a leaked memo he ends up talking about how there are that the immigration numbers, especially coming over Roxham Road, are just not sustainable anymore. So despite the fact that he was giving a hard time to Lisa MacLeod and every other Canadian who would ever dare question the Trudeau government's immigration policy. Despite this, he even himself believes that we're bringing in too many immigrants. Oh, there we go. Sorry, for a second I thought my web browser closed. So from Canada Immigration Newsletter, international migration to Canada reached record levels in second quarter of 2018. International migration accounts for 82% of the population growth between April 1st and July 1st. International migration of Canada reached an unprecedented level between April 1st and July 1st, 2018, driving an overall population increase that was the second largest recorded for a 3-month period since 1971. Canada's population grew by 168,687 in the second quarter of 2018, which is 82%, or 138,978 was attributed to international migration. Statistics Canada says the level of international migration was never before seen for any quarter. So you're bringing in too many people when 80% of your population growth is coming strictly alone from migration. Now I know that Canada has a very low birth numbers right now. But the other problem with this is that a number of these people who are coming in happen to be they happen to have a lot of kids. This is actually something that we were hearing about when the Syrian refugees first arrived, is that about a year after the first ones arrived, there was this report that came out across a bunch of different news articles about Syrians that were going back to Syria because they were unhappy with the accommodations that they received in Canada. And it seemed like they were expecting the best of the best quality and the best of the best housing, because they were talking about how the housing wasn't enough to sustain their family. One of the problems is that in Canada, when you have an average of 2 or 3 kids, sometimes even one or none, you don't have the houses that are really built for that. But when you're coming in and you have an average of 4 to 5 kids, and some can have even more than that, being 8, 9, 10 kids, then you're not going to have the space to do that. They were also pissed off that the furniture wasn't the best quality, most likely because this was IKEA stuff. Stuff that you would just put together yourself that isn't necessarily the best quality, but it does the job. But they ended up returning because of that. So this is also the problem that we have, is we just have so many people that are actually we have so many people that are just that are coming in with so many kids, we just can't support it anymore. And this one, feds warn of tipping point in public support for immigration levels. Now, this one is a bit of an older article. It's from April 13th, 2018, but I've referenced it a few times before on my channel because I find it significant that people don't actually know what the numbers are when it comes to immigration. It says, internal data prepared by the Immigration Department for a committee of deputy ministers suggests that a majority of Canadians support current immigration levels, but their support drops when Canadians are informed of how many immigrants actually arrive every year. It says, so who are they talking to? The department told the coordinating committee of deputy ministers during a meeting in April 2017 to discuss migrant outcomes. There is a tipping point that, once reached, undermines the history of relative Canadian consensus. The internal department data was obtained by the Canadian press through access to information. It includes polling data that suggests over 50% of Canadians believe that the number of immigrants who come to Canada every year is about right, and this number has remained steady since 2012. But most of the respondents believe that the number of immigrants arrive every year was under 150,000. Now, despite this number, 150,000, I've even heard people who talk about lower numbers. They actually think it's 100,000. So I think when they say that they typically think it's under 150,000, I think that this is the high end of the number. But there are many Canadians actually believe that the number is lower, under 100,000 a year. After they were told it was actually 260,000 for the past few years, the number of people who said that they felt there was too many jumped from 23% to 32%. And I gotta admit that I wasn't actually sure of what the immigration numbers were until I read this myself. And then that was kind of a wake-up call for me, that we're talking over 250,000 people every year into Canada. And this is not and the thing is this is actually starting to become the lesser numbers. Like, we have higher numbers now that the Trudeau government wants to welcome into our country. Just give that a second to load. So it's it's quite concerning. So before I continue on, I'm just going to quickly go to the chat, see what you all are talking about, see if there's anything. Seems like there's enough fun and conversations going on in the chat right now. Kind of like the last comment I saw from Duke Income. Canadians have low fucking birth numbers because we can't afford a home or milk to feed our families. Yeah, I know what you mean. It's difficult these days. Actually, a number of people that are who are buying homes these days, they typically need help doing that. And I don't just mean from loans from the banks or mortgages. I mean they need help from family in order to be able to afford homes. But One thing that came out, this is actually from October 2017. Minister says 300,000 immigrants a year is Canada's new normal. So if you thought 260,000 was too much, well, you ain't seen anything yet. The government's plan for annual immigration levels, which was set at 300,000 for this year, is expected to be tabled in the House of Commons next week. Let's see. 300,000 is our new normal, Ahmed Hussein said, while not closing the door on higher numbers in 2018. Quote, as a government, we went from 260,000 to 300,000 because the need to meet the demands of Canadian families who wanted to reunite with their loved ones, Hussein continued, but also employers who are asking us to allow them to continue to use immigration more and more as a way to meet their growth needs. And that goes back again to what I was talking about at the very beginning, where it had to do with people want to bring in immigrants and hire them on. More than anything, they want to do it because of they want to be able to, that immigrants will be willing to accept lower pay and less benefits than the average Canadian worker. But this is going to be the new normal. And the thing is, too, is this we're not even this isn't even where it ends either. But so nobody has yet ever explained to me the true reason for massive immigration. Like, what is the benefit of massive immigration? People say, like, again, we have people like Ahmed Hussein says, like, we need to do it because reunion. Other people say that it has to do with an aging population without the youth population in order to look after them. But we take on a lot more numbers than we actually need. Do you really think we need 300,000 every year just in order to make ends meet? And I don't believe this one is coming from the Trudeau government or Ahmed Hussein. Number one, because their numbers are constantly changing. That's number one. And number two, it has to do with the fact of who that Ahmed Hussein and Justin Trudeau typically associate with. It's no coincidence that that we're having this, where at the same time we have people like Justin Trudeau having private meetings, and well, we know there's private ones, but we also know there are public ones that are taking place with people like George Soros, who has the Open Society Foundation. And the whole idea of the Open Society Foundation is to tear down the sovereignty of a nation in order to tear down the sovereignty of a nation. And they tear down the borders too. And this, you really think it's a coincidence that suddenly after Trudeau came into office that we were having such a huge influx of immigrants while he's doing nothing about it? It's one thing to blame it on Trump. It's another thing to, it's an absolutely another thing when it happens at such significant numbers. Ahmed Hussein. One second. Yeah, so that was for earlier. I showed you a picture of Justin Trudeau with Ahmed Hussein. With George Soros. But this one here, if it'll fucking load for me, is okay. This top left photo that you see here, because it doesn't want to load for me right now. I kind of got a crappy laptop. That right there is Ahmed Hussein with George Soros' son. So are you really surprised that they're not doing anything about this whatsoever? But again, we're just getting to the tipping point right now, because Canada to admit nearly 1 million immigrants over 3 years. This was from November 1st, 2017. So now we're talking about even more immigrants than the friggin' 300,000 that they were talking about. It's still another 100,000 more. The numbers keep going up and up and up. 450 immigrants a year. Canada could do it, report suggests. And this is from October 3rd, 2017. So why? Why do we need such large numbers of immigrants every single year? Especially because of where these immigrants come from. I mean, a lot of people will point to you and say, well, they're actually coming from Europe or something. Not really. Not freaking really, actually. many of these people don't. Many of these people are actually coming from Middle Eastern countries, and we've already having a lot of problems when they come from Middle Eastern countries. I mean, when you have we have so many like the whole idea of Islam is that it's a Arab supremacist religion. So even if you are Muslim and you are, say, a white person, you are actually seen as inferior simply because of that reason. So what do you think is going to happen when you bring in a large portion of people from the Middle East who hold these radical points of view? Sure, maybe it's not every single one, but there's a significant number out there of them who do hold those radical beliefs. And this was even something that was recent. It's was a German feminist, SJW, admits she got it wrong on immigration, plans to immigrate for her retirement. So what it was is that this woman started up a foundation that helped during the 2015 European crisis. She advocated for a lot of the she advocated for to bring in a bunch of immigrants, and then she started to see the problems that was happening. She was talking about the problems she had in her own home with some of them that she housed. She was talking about the ones she saw in society. So the point was is that she said, "Oh, we got it wrong. We brought in all these people. Our society's falling apart." So I'm going to move to another country once I retire. And I think she was either I think it was Hungary she was talking about, or maybe Poland. It was one of these European countries that had no intention of letting in these refugees, as they're talking about. The other problem that we're seeing is that we also have a really large number of diseases that have come in because of this. Because we're just a lot of people over here are vaccinated, but the problem is that we don't see these diseases anymore. But suddenly they're coming in simply because we have so many people coming into our countries. Like Germany is a country that has had this problem. They've seen rises in diseases such as tuberculosis. And the cost for something like this is astronomical, which leads to our debt as well. And it's not just us, it's many countries around the world. Germany is another one that their welfare state is being overburdened by the amount of immigrants that have come in who are demanding that they have access to the welfare and many other social services that they have there, even though they haven't paid into it at all in their entire life. In fact, they were talking about how Germans may actually have to work later in life simply because they can't afford it anymore. Where is it? Oh, there it is. So right now, I'm just going over the problems that we're facing. I will be getting into it more and more in a little bit about the. I will be getting into it a little more, talking about the like what is the point of this and what is the who's financing it. In a little bit. I'm just going over some of the problems right now. Okay, so this one doesn't want to open for me, but it was a report from the Fraser Institute that was saying that immigrants cost Canadians $23 billion a year, and this was actually coming back from 2011 when this article came out. So since then, especially when we've had such a rise in amount of people coming across the border, you can imagine that that number has gotten even higher over the last 7 years or so. But it's gotten to the things that they want to, that our government wants us to do, is shocking to me. For instance, this is one that I came across several months ago, and I always kind of keep it saved because I always thought it was a little too unreal. But with the amount of people crossing a Roxham Road, we were having a lot of overcrowding in the homeless shelters, especially in Toronto. And so let's see, did I have the place I want? Oh shit, hold on. Crap, I pretty sure I had highlighted the area I wanted. But this article right here, this article from the Toronto Star. What it was talking about is how the situation has gotten so bad that the city of Toronto was actually asking people to asking citizens to take in these migrants, take them into their homes, and give them shelter, food, and everything for a while. Now, you don't know who these people are, but you're being asked to open your homes to them. I mean, fuck. Would you if a guy you've never met before in your life was just knock on your door and ask to be housed, would you do it? Now we have people from other countries which we know absolutely nothing about and have such a difference in culture that they're asking for you to be they're asking for you to open your doors to them. And I'm sure by now everybody is aware of the strategies that is everyone is aware of the strategies that are being used, such as if you're refusing the idea of immigration, then you'll be called racist. I mean, hell, we just had that not too long ago, where it was after the murder of that poor girl, Marissa Shen. I can't remember the woman's name, but there was that one woman who was speaking to the media, the one who had the coffee thrown on her. She was she was actually talking about how we needed checks and balances down at the border. But even saying that became apparently, according to the mainstream media, was racist because she's talking about how you need to do something and make sure that not the wrong people are coming across the border. And what she ends up, what one of the reporters says to her is, "How does it feel to be racist on national television?" And all the woman was ever talking about had nothing to do with racism, and she even says it herself. She says, "No, this has to do with this has to do with." She ends up saying to her, saying, "This hasn't had nothing to do with skin color. It's everything to do with who's coming across the border. It doesn't matter whether you're black, brown, white. We want to know who you are, and we want the checks and balances in place." Okay, where am I? There I am. So this is from warfare.today, and this is "Weaponizing Migration is a New Battle Space." We have already heard much talk about weaponized narratives and seen the result of cyber warfare from the Ukraine to the US elections, allegedly. We now add the hybrid warfare arsenal, a new strategy concept, the weaponize of mass migration, or to coin the phrase, sociological warfare. Simply shifting a large mass of people into the enemy territory produces chaos, conflict, and economic erosion within the aggressor having to fire a single shot, without the aggressor having to fire a single shot or even appearing to have done anything. Air Force General Philip M. Breedlove, the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe and commander of the U.S. European Command, suggested that the U.S. Senate Armed Service Committee in 2016 that, quote, "Russia and the Assad regime have deliberately weaponized migration from Syria in an attempt to overwhelm European structures and break European resolve." Russia denies this. Now, the thing is, I actually think is wrong about what he said. His concept is right, but he says the Russia and Assad regime have deliberately weaponized migrations from Syria. I don't actually believe that it's Russia or Assad themselves, because as I've been going through this, I've actually the same organizations, the same group of people keep popping up, and I'll be getting into them in a little bit, but here are a few of them right here. So we can use it's the Carnegie Corporation of New York, the Ford Foundation, JPB Foundation, and the reason that's in red is because that's played a little bit of a lesser role from what I can say. The Open Society Foundation, Unbound Philanthropy. Now, I would say the two biggest ones are Open Society Foundation and Unbound Philanthropy that have been playing a big role in doing this. So I don't actually believe it is so much to do with the actual governments themselves of Syria and Syria and Russia. It has more to do with these organizations and the people who are funding them. I mean, the Open Society Foundation is, as I was already stating earlier, is the George Soros one, about tearing down people's borders and allowing for mass migration to come in. So that's where I think that this general this Air Force general, Philip M. Breedlove, was actually wrong on this situation. Although the constant warfare that goes on in the Middle East is assisting this situation, because they all every time that the immigrants come out of the warfare, they always head to Europe or they head over here to the West, to U.S. and Canada. But you'll notice that there's certain countries over in the Middle East that won't actually take on immigrants or do anything about them. I mean, one thing that I always thought was interesting was that for a lot of the Syrian refugees, especially the original ones that came over to Canada back in 2015, or 2015, 2016 area, is that many of them had been settled in Jordan. But then they ended up getting uprooted from Jordan to come to Canada. Now, what was the point of that? I mean, why would not Turkey, Jordan, or any one of these other ones, Israel as another one, why would they not be the ones taking on the immigration? Because it's more of the similar cultures over there. They actually would have similar languages, if not the same language, for some of these countries, such as Turkey or Jordan. But they don't end up taking them in very much. I mean, Turkey, yeah, I guess maybe a little bit they have in the past, but why is it always that they're heading to Europe and they're heading to the US and Canada? That's quite interesting to me, if you ask me. But anyway, the New York Times reported that one group that needs no convincing about Russia's manipulation on the migrant issue is the migrants themselves. The current situation in Germany is a case in point. Earlier this month, Dr. Benjamin Weithal, writing for the Jewish Policy Center, quoted an unnamed senior security official as saying that the great influx of people from all parts of the world will lead to instability in our country. We are producing extremists through immigration. Mainstream civil societies is radicalizing because the majority don't want migration, and they are being forced to accept it by the political elites. And that is the key right there. They are being forced to accept it by the political elites. It doesn't matter whether or not that is something that you want, or even if you've had enough, you're having enough problems with people in your own country. That's they're still bringing in more and more, and they do everything they can to silence them. One thing I saw that was quite concerning to me was somebody, I can't remember who it was now, but they ended up going over to Sweden. Sweden, which has been having a lot of problems with the immigrant population there. Now, what ended up happening was that they started talking to the people there, and the people were well aware of the problems that were going on. But when they are asked if they should maybe cut down their immigration or anything, people were constantly saying, no, we shouldn't do that. That's racist. Why would you say that to whoever was asking them the question? And this is what the idea of political correctness and this use of racism and xenophobia and bigotry really does, is that it's informed to silence you so you're not speaking out about the issues. And it's a very effective strategy. Nobody wants to be considered a racist, even I mean, these days, people are starting to just sort of wash away the word. It doesn't matter anymore. You're just going to call anybody racist, anybody bigoted. But the main reason is just so you're not speaking out. You're not talking about the problems at hand. And the media is very complicit in this because they themselves will call people racist, bigoted, simply because you're not agreeing with their left-wing point of view. And they'll turn on their own people whenever it's convenient. If somebody considers themselves on the left-wing camp, but they're not in favor of the mass migration, they're immediately turned upon. So this article right here is Immigration as Economic Warfare. The conflict in Syria and surrounding areas has resulted in, according to the Washington Post, 250,000 people killed and around 11 million displaced. At least 4 million have fled, with many headed towards Europe and the United States. This is a tragedy of increasingly enormous proportions. For the purpose of this blog, one critical question arises. Is this strategy being exploited as an economic warfare against the West? Frighteningly, the answer appears to be yes. This isn't simply a crisis and opportunity for compassion. There are very real threats emanating, and we must be prepared to counter them. There are some who seek to overwhelm the system as political acts with the hope of collapsing it. This crisis creates a creation, then allows a reform and reworking of the system. Those who create the crisis gain control. This is more or less what I said at the beginning about the why people would use this idea of migration warfare. This is basically the Cloward-Piven strategy. And the Cloward-Piven strategy is a political strategy outlined in 1966 by American sociologist and political activist Richard Cloward and Francis Fox Piven that called for overloading the U.S. public welfare system in order to precipitate a crisis that would lead to a replacement of the welfare system with a national system of a guaranteed annual income and thus an end to poverty. And if you've noticed too, actually, there's been a lot more conversation of where people are talking about maybe we should have universal basic income. Maybe that would be a more appropriate way to go about things. I know that's been the talk here. I've heard some talk in the US about that, and I'm sure over in Europe that's been some of the talk as well. And one way that you can facilitate this is by bringing in a bunch of immigrants, a bunch of asylum seekers, who then require assistance, but they're not going to be able to find the work to do so. So then people can start having that conversation. Well, maybe we should just give everyone a set amount of money. It's literally a communist strategy. It's a Marxist strategy. Many because you can tell by the sort of policies that they're starting to push out ever since this is going on, has to do a lot more of socialist and Marxist strategy. It's going against the capitalist idea of going against your own providing for yourself. I don't know why I was saying going against. It's providing for yourself and having to pay your own way. Instead, it should be that you are looked after by the government. But again, the idea itself doesn't have to do that they care so much about people coming in that they want to provide them with income and look after them. The idea is of expanding government, create a big government, because the more and more laws you implement, the more and more you publicize a lot of private industries, then the more control the government gets over. And the government, as long as they have some control in it, whether it's subsidies or actually some sort of partnership with businesses, they get their say in there. And the government is the ultimate authority, which means that the government, regardless of legality, is going to get their way. Let's see. Which one was this again? That was okay. Okay, right. I know where I am now. So now we're getting more into the idea of who's funding this. We see the problems, we see the strategies that are being used. So, who's funding this? This one was from the New York Times back in 2014. And we can see here it says, a vital part of the expansion, when President Obama announced major changes to the immigration reform enforcement system as early as next week, his decision will be partly the result of a year-long campaign of pressure by immigrant rights groups, which have grown from a cluster of lobbying organizations into a national force. A vital part of the expansion has involved money, major donations from the nation's wealthiest liberal foundations, including the Ford Foundation, the Carnegie Corporation of New York, the Open Society Foundation of the financier George Soros, and the Atlantic Philanthropies. Over the past decade, those donors have invested more than $30 million in immigrant organizations, including many fighting for a pathway to citizenship for immigrants here illegally. And if you'll notice, remember the ones I just mentioned just now, these groups here: Ford Foundation, Carnegie Corporation of New York, Open Society Foundation, Atlantic Philanthropies. We go back here to the National Immigration Law Center, Carnegie Corporation New York, Ford Foundation, Open Society Foundation, and they didn't mention Unbound Philanthropy in that one, but Unbound Philanthropy is one of the big ones we're going to get into. Now, the first one is we're talking about has to do with the Ford Foundation. And the Ford Foundation actually it does hold some resemblance to it has some connection to actually Henry Ford. It was actually started up by Henry Ford, the Ford family. But it seems like nowadays it doesn't really hold much. It doesn't hold an interest in the actual company itself, into the car company. Second, gotta get a few things open. And I mean, George Soros has been one of the main ones that we've seen on the front lines before. Like, so many people are aware of George Soros and what he does, but George Soros is just the tip of the iceberg. He's the one that is placed up front for everybody to see and for everybody to know about, because because everyone else is playing behind the scenes. So he's actually the tip of the iceberg. He's many people like to see him as the puppet master when he's not the puppet master. He is higher up in the chain, don't get me wrong, but he's still on the lower end of the totem pole, the lower end of the pyramid compared to some of the other people that are in play. So for the Ford Foundation, for fiscal year 2014, it reports assets of $12.4 billion US and approved $507.9 million and grants. So this is a lot of money that the Ford Foundation has, which is also why I'm always suspicious of these foundations, of these philanthropists, because they're never the way that they seem. In fact, one example I was thinking about when I was looking over this stuff and I was trying to think of something is actually the example of Bruce Wayne and Batman. See, in the comic series, the movies, and the games, everything to do with Batman, Bruce Wayne is supposed to be a philanthropist, donating money to this human rights cause, donating money to that cause over here. But the whole idea behind why he did it wasn't so much that Bruce Wayne was a swell guy that just wanted to do right by humanity. It was actually quite the opposite. It was meant to keep up appearances. It was meant to keep up appearances for himself and his company, so that way he could go out at night and fight crime on the streets. But he even used the other reason for you doing a lot of these donations sometimes was for actually some of the stuff he did as Batman. Sometimes it was because it was to gain access to certain people, but a lot of times too it was to pay for his gadgets or to pay for this, pay for that, so that for his crime fighting. And without bringing in the idea of fighting crime, this is exactly what a lot of these foundations and these organizations are for, these philanthropists as they like to present themselves. They're not doing it because they're swell guys that want to give back to the community. They're doing it to cover and mask for themselves. And actually, another way too is the fact that these foundations are a way for people to pay off people without the money going directly to them. It's sort of a runabout scheme. This is actually can be seen with both the Clinton Foundation and the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation. The whole idea of them is that you put the money into the foundation instead of paying them off directly. And then you pretty much have bought that politician. You've bought the Clintons. You have bought Trudeau, or I was about to say Pierre Trudeau, but that actually foundation started after Pierre Trudeau's death. But a perfect example of this is if you look at the funding of both the Clinton Foundation and the Trudeau Foundation. The Clinton Foundation received a lot of money when Hillary Clinton was running for president, and then a bunch of that money just stopped. As soon as she lost the presidential nomination, people stopped donating to her. Well, if they believed in the Clinton Foundation and what it was doing, then why would they stop donating to her just because she lost the presidential election? But this was because people were paying into her in order to get her to do what they wanted her to do. And it's very similar to what happened in the Trudeau Foundation, only a little bit differently. Because the Trudeau Foundation is still getting more and more money. But ever since Justin Trudeau started going out, it started getting a little bit more money once Trudeau became a politician. But when he was going out to be leader of the Liberal Party, that's when the money started flowing in. And that's when the foreign money started flowing into it. And then when he became the leader of the Liberal Party, oh man, that money just skyrocketed. Suddenly, they're getting more foreign donations than they ever got in local money from like people donating to the foundation itself. And they said it was all coming from one guy, John McCall McBain, and he himself owns a foundation, the John McCall McBain Foundation. But they're saying, oh, this one guy, he's the one giving all the money to the Trudeau Foundation. Bullshit. He's just the cover. He was just the cover, so that way people could give the money to Justin Trudeau. And this money is continued on, and it's even increased since Justin Trudeau became prime minister. Think about the type of people he hangs around with. We showed a picture of George Soros. We have the Aga Khan, who has probably donated a significant amount of money to Justin Trudeau. And despite the fact that he's given Trudeau a nice vacation on the island, you can guarantee that the whole reason for that was to just discuss some political action. I mean, do you think it's much of a coincidence that Trudeau was there along with Aga Khan and John Kerry from the U.S. at the same time? And where can they actually afford this much money, such as the Ford Foundation, where it gets $12.4 billion? Right now, we have Darren Walker, who is he's the president of the Ford Foundation, and we can see here Darren Walker is president of the Ford Foundation, an international social justice philanthropy with a $13 billion endowment and $600 million in annual grant making. And like he himself is a rich man, and it seems, and the funny thing is that so many of these philanthropists are involved with social justice. All of them, social justice, social justice, social justice. It's all a cover. That's all it is. It's nothing more than that. And I will say that please forgive me for those. I'm just really getting into this, so there's not much of a chance to actually go and check the chat. I'll kind of take a look over before I end this about what exactly you all are talking about. I hope you're having a good conversation in there, though. But even amongst these foundations, you can find that a number of people have connections from one foundation to the next, whether that happens to be to the Open Society Foundation or to the Ford Foundation. In fact, what we're going to get into in just a minute is how the Carnegie Corporation of New York, it actually has it has connection to the Ford Foundation. Just need it to open for me. It's always the problem, the opening. But you're going to see how both the EU and the UN is also complicit in this whole thing that's going on. What do you mean you can't open it? Hold on. Pages are being a bitch right now. Like I said, I'm just kind of using a crappy laptop, so I think it's just getting a little overloaded by everything. Okay, there's one that's open. Okay, well, I'll go with this one because this page at least opened for me. So here is Vartan Gregorian. He's the president of Carnegie Corporation of New York. He is the 12th president of the corporation, a grant-making institution founded by Andrew Carnegie in 1911. Prior to his current position, which he assumed in June 1997, he served for 9 years as the 16th president of Brown University. Which is also, you'll notice that a lot of them have connection to universities, which I think for a lot of reasons goes into the whole idea of the long march through the institutions, is the fact that a number of these people, especially how involved they are with social justice, they are actually, they're using their positions of authority in order to influence the minds of the young. So, President Gregorian is the author of Road to Home, My Life and Times, Islam, a Mosaic, Not a Monolith, and the Emergence of Modern Afghanistan, 1880 to 1946, a Phi Beta Kappa, and a Ford Foundation Foreign Area Training Fellow. Ford Foundation. He is a recipient of numerous fellowships, including those of the John Simmons Guggenheim Foundation, the American Council of Learned Societies, Social Science Research Council, and the American Philosophy Society. So we can see, so he's going back, we're going back to the connections that he has, and this other page does not want to fucking load for me. So I may have to skip it then. It's Andrew Carnegie's story. Andrew Carnegie started up that foundation that we were just talking about. And his story is a little bit interesting. Just how by 24 he wasn't much of anything. He really wasn't. But then suddenly, by the time he was 30, he was like super rich. He owned all companies in all the important industries: steel, oil, railroad, like everywhere that was important for their time. So that was what I thought was a little interesting about the Andrew Carnegie story. Is just how he seemed to just out of nowhere create his fortune and have bought into all of these industries. These would not be cheap to buy into. Okay. So the next one that we're looking into is the Open Society Foundation. Now, this one a lot of people have focused on in the past, and I've already said a little bit about it. But one of their main focuses, and this is sort of what's similar to the what was it called? The Unbound Philanthropy, is that they have a major focus in immigration for some reason. There's just that seems to be where they've decided that out of everything that they could possibly put money towards, it's immigration. Why? What is the significance of immigration? Are they really just going to say that they care so much about the people coming into a society, or they care so much that the population is aging, they want to make sure that the elderly are taken care of? These rich billionaires don't care about that. But it says here, welcoming and integrating societies. From the Open Society Foundation. We aim to deepen support for refugees and migration through welcoming initiatives that create bridges between natives and newcomers, and to use insight on public attitudes to inform policy and advocacy. We pay close attention to the concerns of host communities and to aim to strengthen their role in integration. So, and that's the thing, we pay close attention to the concerns of host communities. So we're talking about like the host country, and aim to strengthen their role in integration. So that's not about people, that's not so much of having to do with the people that are, the immigrants coming into a country of integration, but they want the host communities to integrate. How curious that it's actually more has to be the people who are living in a certain country or certain community are the ones that have to adapt to the new people coming in. You know, I'm not the biggest fan of Alex Jones, but if there's one thing that he has that's true, it's his slogan where he says, "There's a war on for your mind." There really is. Yeah, I think this is what I wanted. I had too many tabs and stuff ready to be able to have them all open at once, so now I'm kind of restricted to doing it now. So we'll just give it a minute to just give it 1 second to open up. There we go. Okay, let me switch this over. There we go. So this is the founder and chair of the Open Society Foundation, George Soros. George Soros is one of the world's foremost philanthropists. He has given away more than $32 billion of his personal fortune to fund the Open Society Foundation work around the world. He is also the founder and primary funder of Central European University in Budapest, a leading regional center for the study of social sciences. Born in Hungary in 1930, he lived through the Nazi occupation from 1944 to 1945, which resulted in the murder of 50,000 Hungarian Jews. His own Jewish family survived by securing false identity papers, concealing their backgrounds, and helping others to do the same. Soros later called that, quote, "Instead of submitting to our fate, we resisted an evil force that was much stronger than we were, yet we prevailed. Not only did we survive, but we managed to help other people," end quote. Did you, George? Did you manage to help other people? Well, this is kind of interesting because many people would say otherwise. And in fact, even George Soros himself has said otherwise. If there's an old interview from back in, I think it was the late 90s. I think it was the late 90s where he ended up kind of talking about his time when what he faced when the Nazis invaded Hungary, I believe they were saying, eh? Well, again, if we can listen to what George Soros has said, and a number of people will probably already be aware of this story, but George Soros did not help the people. He actually did quite the opposite. George Soros actually helped the Nazis. He helped them confiscate their territory, and he had no regrets over it whatsoever. Here, I'm going to let's play this.
It was a tremendous threat of evil. I mean, it was a very personal experience of evil.
My understanding is that you went out with this protector of yours who swore that you were his adopted godson.
Yes.
Went out, in fact, and helped in the confiscation of property from the Jews.
That's right.
Yes. I mean, that sounds like an experience that would send lots of people to the psychiatric couch for many, many years. Was it difficult?
Not at all. Not at all. Maybe as a child you don't see the connection, but it created no problem at all.
No feeling of guilt.
No.
For example, that I'm Jewish, and here I am watching these people go. I could just as easily be there. I should be there. None of that.
Well, of course, I could be on the other side, or I could be the one from whom the thing is being taken away. But there was no sense that I shouldn't be there, because that was, well, actually, funny way, it's just like in markets, that if I weren't there, of course I wasn't doing it, but somebody else would be taking it away anyhow. In other words, whether I was there or not, I was only a spectator, the property was being taken away. So I had no role in taking away that property. So I had no sense of guilt.
Wow. That's all you can say is just wow. Is that this guy he literally helped confiscate property from other Jewish people, and then now he says he has no guilt. In fact, he's trying to deflect the blame and say, well, no, if it wasn't me, it'd be somebody else. Well, you can make that claim for anything, and he also tries to make the claim in business that it's like, well, if I'm not going to do it, someone else will. But he absolutely played a role in that simply by helping them do that. Even if he was just showing them which one of the Jewish homes and he absolutely played his role, and now he's trying to deflect from there. This is just an idea into the mind of the man. So he talks about in that article that we read from the Open Society Foundation how they said that he had that it was evil and yet we prevailed. He said, we managed to help others. Well, clearly you didn't. You sold other people out, George. You sold them out to the Nazis. And the thing is, too, is it's even been revealed that George Soros, he spent billions upon billions of dollars to help influence American politics. The thing is, too, is I don't actually... How much money did they say? I think it was $32 billion he's put into the Open Society Foundation. That is a lot of dough. That is a lot of dough, but I don't even think that that's how much he has available to him. Which, yeah, exactly. Here we go. George Soros' net worth is $8.3 billion US. So he says he put $32 billion into his organization. How the hell did he afford that if his net worth is $8.3 billion? I mean, sure, it would be considered over the years, but this is to me, this was just proof that George Soros is not acting alone, that the idea of the Open Society Foundation and where his money comes from is being given to him also by other people. And this is probably where the idea of the Rothschild Bank and the Rockefellers come into it, is that that George Soros is sort of their pawn for these organizations, for these elite families. Because I haven't actually, I admit, I haven't looked into it too much yet, but I think it was Little Gray Cells, for people who know the channel. Seamus there. He was actually telling me how George Soros actually at one point was going broke, but he ended up getting money given to him by he ended up having money given to him by somebody. It may have even been the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers who gave him more money. But the point is that George Soros was on his way out the door from the billionaire club, but then somehow he was given relief. And you can take a look at a number how this just plays into it, at how all these rich families and everything are constantly getting into position of powers. Right now, actually, in the U.S., Donald Trump, his back in the 80s, his casinos were going under, and he ended up getting bailed out by Wilbur Ross. Now, and Wilbur Ross also donated to Trump's campaign, and now suddenly Wilbur Ross is the Secretary of Commerce, I believe it is. So you just see how they always manage to make their ways into positions of power. And it says, left-wing billionaire think tank aims to use migrant crisis to influence immigration policies worldwide. Plans of George Soros' think tank are revealed in leaked memo. And I think... Did I have... I think I have certain areas of this that was supposed to be highlighted. Hold on. Hold on 1 second. All right. The foundation says that its investment in global work means that it is the right partners for its position to help others navigate this space. The memo adds that the refugee crisis is opening new opportunities for coordination and collaboration with other rich organizations. It was only recently that George Soros, who broke the Bank of England in 1992, said that the German Chancellor's decision to open the country's door wide to refugees was not properly thought out. Now, the real reason for this is just for how badly Angela Merkel went about the whole situation. She didn't really, for her, all she did was that she just let everybody in. But this is actually what was, but what was the problem with this, with what she did, was that she just allowed, she didn't bring in, she brought all these people in, and she didn't do anything to actually properly prepare everybody, the German people, for it. So the point is that we're seeing rise in a lot of radical groups now, or I shouldn't even say radical, that's the word that people like the mainstream media would use, but like groups such as the rise in a lot of anti-immigration groups and people who are trying to push back. So it actually throws a wrench into the plans of people like George Soros and the other organizations and billionaires that are trying to finance this. Interesting. Oh, I think I know why. Hold on 1 second. Gotta try reopening this. Here we go. So the next one is this is another one of the big ones, especially who focus on the immigration crisis, is Unbound Philanthropy. Unbound Philanthropy is, they've almost primarily put their focus into the immigration crisis. It's just immigration in general. So we have underneath unboundphilanthropy.org, their mission. Unbound Philanthropy works in the field of migration to transform long-standing but solvable barriers to the human rights of migrants and refugees and their integration into host societies. We seek to strengthen social, civic, and economic opportunities and relationships of mutual responsibilities and respect across communities. Our vision. Our vision is a world where all people can enjoy a life free of barriers to their full economic, civic, and cultural participation in society, realize their potential, and live peacefully alongside each other. But now, if we go and take a look, this article is from InsidePhilanthropy.com. This funder is laser focused on immigration. Have you heard of it? This one is Unbound Philanthropy. So, founded in 2003 and only acquiring a staff member in 2008, Unbound Philanthropy hasn't been around for too long, but its laser focused on immigration issues and how communities can welcome the newcomers in their midst well predate the Trump phenomenon. That puts Unbound in a good position to capitalize on new energy in the funding community around immigration. As Executive Director Taryn Higashi described it, the organization's goals aren't partisan or political. Higashi, who previously led Ford's grant-making in migrant and refugee rights, once again, the Ford Foundation. He described to me Unbound's mission in broad terms, talking about opportunities for philanthropy to contribute to humane and forward-looking policies in the migration field, thereby protecting human dignity and developing cultures and policies for the common good. Unbound's last reported asset approached $200 million and made $61.2 million in grants between 2005 and 2006. And then William Reeves is the main person we're talking about here. William Reeves, Bill Reeves, as he's also known, is one of the main people that are funding this. A financier who co-funded Blue Crest Capital Management. Reeves is also on the board of Third Way, a centrist think tank in Washington, D.C., and also co-founder of Learning Coalition, which seeks to improve public schools in Hawaii. Now, this guy, Bill Reeves, has been described as the George Soros of Hawaii for a lot of the things that he wants to implement. We'll get into him a little more in a minute. Among grant makers and nonprofit concerns with immigrants, Unbound has stepped into a prominent role. Unbound was the first institutional funder of the Unite We Dream network, which has become one of the nation's leading immigration activist network. This funder takes the cultural component of its mission seriously. Alongside the Nathan Cummings Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the JBB Foundation, and General Service Foundation, Unbound is currently backing a pop culture collaborative. The goal of the $25 million fund is to leverage philanthropic resources towards entertainment, advertising, media to popularize authentic, just narratives of people of color, immigrants, refugees, and Muslims that together tell a powerful story of how we all belong in America. So they want to use the media to influence your mind. That's what they're trying to do right now. This is something that we've seen many times in the past. Is how people will use the media in order to and try and adjust your way of thinking. This is actually one of the big arguments people have when they're talking about Hollywood or TV, about how it has a predominantly left-wing point of view, is that it's trying to manipulate you. It's trying to change the way you think. And if you're somebody that can't think critically or think for yourself, then this is definitely going to be something that's going to affect you, something that you'll easily buy into without even realizing it. And we're going to take a little bit look into Bill Reeves and see what he exactly what he's done. Let's take a quick look in the chat while that stuff is opening. Okay. So when we're talking about Bill Reeves is a financial executive and Hawaii native, co-founded Blue Crest Capital Management, a hedge fund based in New York City that manages $35 billion for institutional investors worldwide. Active within this local community, and particularly devoted to childhood education, Bill Reeves donates to Hawaii Department of Education. Prior to founding Blue Crest, Mr. Reeves served as a managing director and head of macro strategy and trading within the property trading groups of J.P. Morgan in New York and London. He is also former fund manager for Fisher, Francis, Trees, and Watts, London. So his connection to groups such as J.P. Morgan should say enough. These big banks, that should be enough to tell you what sort of guy this is. Now, this next one, I don't typically go to Breitbart because I kind of, in a lot of ways, see him as almost the right-wing HuffPo in a lot of ways, but they did, this was one area where they did do a fair amount of good research. So Hawaii's George Soros, the hidden donors funding the illegal immigration, Black Lives Matter activist. So when talking about this, it says these unrelated stories, which is July 2015 case erupted at Progress Net Root Nation conference in Phoenix, Arizona. Moderator Jose Antonio Vargas tried to keep order during the forum in 2016 primaries when Black Lives Matter activist Taya Oso stormed the stage. The United Kingdom, a group called Hope Not Hate, released a report that attacks the counter-jihad movement as anti-Muslim hate. The report, released in London-based group, mentioned Breitbart News 4 times and goes after writers like Ben Shapiro and Pamela Geller and Texas Congressman Louis Gohmert. Artist and activist Fabiana Rodriguez promotes and uses a butterfly motif as a symbol of migration in an attempt to blur the lines between legal and illegal migration. A group called the Puente Human Rights Movement wages a year-long campaign against Arizona Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio over his enforcement of immigration laws, including protests and a lawsuit. These seemingly unconnected stories, plus numerous other lawsuits, policy proposals, and hundreds of more protests and disruption promoting extremist positions on immigration, have one thing in common. They are all funded by a pair of Hawaiian-based multimillionaire mega donors. Few people know the name of Bill Reeves and Debbie Berger. Debbie Berger is also one of the co-founders of what was it called? Unbound Philanthropy. Look. So she's one of the co-founders. She's also the wife of Bill Reeves. It says, Reeves could be described as George Soros of Hawaii because of the massive funding he's given to many radical groups pushing pro-illegal immigration agenda. Reeves and his wife, Debbie Berger, are one of the people behind Unbound Philanthropy, a group who has given tens of millions of dollars to pro-open borders activist groups both in the United States and United Kingdom. Reeves and Berger are also both major Democrat donors, and their group also has connected to the exclusive Punahou School, the elite private school that President Barack Obama attended. So that's why, actually, I was not really aware of Unbound Philanthropy until I started doing this research. But I actually believe are one of the big players out there. That they're one of the ones that you have to be watching for. And I think they've also been pretty active in the... I've also believe that they've also been pretty active in the... anti-Trump movement as well. So yeah, they're another one of those other groups that I'm going and people that I'm going to be paying a particularly close attention to because they clearly got their hand in the basket right now. But this whole point of using mass immigration, it is to undermine the people, and it's because we can see that with these people who have so much influence, who have so much power, when everything breaks down, they're going to be fine. They'll be fine. They don't have to, if they're living in a certain country and say civil war breaks out because people are at each other's throats so bad, they're just going to get out. They're going to have their own personal guards to look after them. They're going to be able to get out of the country. And then when everything settles and the whole society's in chaos, they'll be the ones that can then come back, put the money towards the rebuilding it, and rebuild it in the image that they want. This whole idea has to do with... the whole idea, more than anything, has to do with using trying to institute a Marxist society. As far as I can tell, that seems to be one of the main goals. But while we were coming to the end of what we were talking about, we're getting really close to the end. But this is other organizations and governmental organizations are complicit in this. One of the perfect ones has to do with the United Nations, and we also in some ways see that the EU is responsible for what's going on. One second. Just getting the last of everything opened up before we continue on. Okay, well, we'll get started on the last little bit. So, as I was saying, I was talking about the the UN, the United Nations has a point in this. Now, a lot of people are already aware of Agenda 2030, and this is pretty much the idea of installing a Marxist organization across the world, that everybody should be free of poverty, everybody should have freedom to move around, everybody should be have this provided, that provided. So we have that, but this actually is going back to the early 2000s when this was actually put out. So the Department of Economics and Social Affairs Population Division. Replacement migration. Is it a solution to declining or aging populations? The United Nations projections indicate that over the next 50 years, the population of virtually all countries of Europe as well as Japan will face population decline and population aging. The new challenges of declining and aging populations will require comprehensive reassessment of many established policies and programs, including those relating to international migration. Focusing on the two striking and critical population trends, the report considers replacing migration for 8 low fertility countries. Replacement migration. And those countries are France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Republic of Korea, Russian Federation, United Kingdoms, and United States. And 2 regions, Europe and the European Union. Replacement migration refers to the international migration that a country would need to offset population decline and population aging resulting from low fertility and mortality rates. So they're literally trying to replace you. That is what the UN is doing. They are trying to replace you. They are trying to replace me. Now, one thing, especially where a lot of these people come from, that they're trying to replace us with. One thing about it is not only do they have the higher birth rates, but is the fact that statistically speaking, people from the area such as the Middle East, they're going to vote for bigger government. They're not going to vote in a lot of the ways that a lot of the people over here do. Well, they'll vote for smaller government, more freedoms, but they're going to vote for bigger government, more access to governmental benefits. So this is actually one way that the idea of mass migration, what it plays into, and why we're seeing the trends that we are today, is because these people will vote on the left wing of politics, which allows them to implement this policy that they want to do, implement this Marxist agenda that they want, implement this idea of replacing everyone. It'll make it a lot easier the more, and this is also the point for multiculturalism, is the fact that this multicultural society will make it a lot easier for them to divide and conquer. We're already seeing it today. And it even comes from United Nations boss unveils plan to promote global mass migration. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has unveiled his plan to promote global mass migration in the left liberal Guardian newspaper. Guterres, a former Socialist Party prime minister in his native Portugal, took over the top job at the UN in January 1st, having previously served as the institution's highest commissioner for refugees. His article titled Migration Can Benefit the World, This is How We at the UN Plan to Help, makes the bold claim that mass migration, quote, powers economic growth, reduces inequality, and connects diverse societies, end quote, in order to promote global compact for migration. That's why the UN is literally a globalist organization. That is the point of what they are doing. And the EU is complicit as well. A lot of what they've done has been to allow this mass migration to happen. In fact, this is what we see right now when a number of countries such as Hungary and Poland and a few others that are opposing the policies that was implemented by the EU has been have actually found themselves on the receiving end of the EU's wrath. That they're saying, well, we're going to implement tariffs against you. We're going to put all sorts of barriers in place for you in trade if you don't get behind us and what we want you to do. You better take in these people, these millions of people. Okay, we're almost there. We're almost there, everyone. We're almost at the end of this. For anybody to stick around this long, I really appreciate it. I know this is at some points this can be very dry, but if you're not aware of a lot of this stuff going around, you need to be, because this is very concerning. And it's the plans that are put in place in order to control you. All right, so the EU planned mass migration. Further research in the organization behind the orchestrating mass immigration to Europe has led to more evidence of direct EU involvement. So this one, we can see it's a link here. It says, in the above linked article, we studied the Watch the Med website, a website dedicated to daily in-depth study of migrant movements through GPS analysis in the Mediterranean Sea. And that would be this one right here that they link to. So the recent since summer of 2015, strong increase of migrants in Europe is no accident. It has been planned and orchestrated by people within the EU. Sky News recently reported on a handbook, Sky Finds Handbook for EU-bound Immigrants, distributed free of charge to migrants in Turkey. These handbooks contain all the information immigrants need when they come to Europe, including emergency phone numbers in case they are in trouble, both at land and sea. The Sky article mentions two websites, Welcome to the EU and Watch the Med. The person who registered the Welcome to the EU website is Bernd Kasparek, a PhD of forensic oceanography, specialized on migration and border control. These people are mostly found on communist and green websites, as in Germany, for example, Interview with Bernd Kasparek. Migrants are often spotted with plastic bags or the green movement. The Watch the Med website is registered by a man named Lorenzo Pisani. A presentation named Refugees and Fortress Europe shows that he is a big supporter of mass migration. More information about him can, for example, be found on the website Delphina Foundation. Quote, Lorenzo is part of the research team Forensic Oceanography, initiated by Charles Healer, produced in the framework of the ERC-funded project Forensic Architecture, Goldsmith Center for Research Architecture. The link to the EU funding may not be a coincidence. Peter Sutherland, UN boss for immigration and former EU commissioner, says that the EU should undermine national homogeny. And then it said, and so that was the first article they go on. And it says, firstly, and this is going back to the original one. Firstly, connected to this, we see that the Frontex, the EU border organization, and the NGOs are actively seeking refugees when they leave Africa coast, most probably probably the coordination and the organization of Watch the Med. We found direct funding, update September 24th, 2017. We found direct funding of EU Commission funds towards the Euromed Rights Organization, an organization ferociously defending migrants' rights as they state themselves, quote, Euromed Right claims to closely monitor policy developments, impact on the rights of migrants and refugees in the Euro-Mediterranean region, of a particular focus on EU's role in promoting these rights. They are directly funded by the EU Commission and George Soros Open Society Foundation. Just refilling my coffee real quick. So, I think that was all it was for this. But we're talking once again about the Open Society Foundation. All these organizations are just connected to one another. All of them are working actively together in order to implement this idea of mass migration. And this is why that getting more involved with the not the European Union, the UN, there's no point to it, because this is the whole idea of the UN is to tear down a country's sovereignty, which is why it kind of kills me that Justin Trudeau is currently trying to get a seat on Security Council, because the more involved you are with the UN, the more restrictive it is on how you can act. In fact, right now, when it comes to refugees, there actually is a UN mandate that says of how you have to act, how many people you have to take in. and it's been used actually. This mandate from the UN has actually been used in order to downplay the in order to restrict how many immigrants a country can take in. Now, I actually don't mean restrict in meaning lowering the numbers, but quite the opposite. They are actually demanding you take in more refugees, more asylum seekers, and they're constantly finding excuses for why you should, why you can't say no to them. There's a lot more going into this subject that we can get into, but I've already gone on for almost an hour and 40 minutes. So I'm going to leave it there for today. But hell of a lot more that you can do and you can look into. And what I think I'm going to do is after I sign off, and it takes a little while before it takes a little while before after you're done streaming before the video is just made available in and of itself. So when that video is made available, what I'm going to do is I just have a bunch of links that I have here that I was doing for my research. What I will do is I will put these links in the description so that anybody who is watching this is interested in going to look at it yourself. Then you have the links to go to. You're not restricted on trying to find them in and of yourself. And there's more in here that I didn't even actually get to, just because for time reasons, or maybe not. It didn't have the most. Maybe it just wasn't necessarily it wasn't necessary for the moment. But there's a lot of information here that people need to look into and realize that the idea of mass immigration in and of itself, as it's being used, is a weapon. Because, and next time somebody is trying to debate you or ask you about next time somebody's trying to bait you or ask you about the necessities of mass migration, like trying to say like we should do it, try engage them and see where actually is the point of it. Why do we need it? Sure, we might have an aging population. That's going to be a problem we have to address. I feel like one thing that is actually going to make that easier, though, is how our technology has advanced a lot more. So that's going to be something that'll help, but we're still going to have that problem regardless. But the idea that we have right now is just we're just being replaced. This is exactly what the idea is for. This is exactly what the idea is for. It's to replace you. Don't ever forget that. And somebody like Justin Trudeau, this is exactly what he's going to do. As the pictures I showed, him and a bunch of his cabinet are connected to George Soros and many other people, such as this. Oh crap! You know what? I just realized I did have a couple more things I wanted to get into before I signed off. They're actually they are good. There's a lot of information in them, and they're kind of important. So I'm actually going to stay on just for a couple more minutes, but once again, I will put all these links and everything that I came across. I will put them in the description after the video is done for anybody that wants to go through and find it for yourself. And I see I now have Concan in the chat. How's it going, Concan? Come on, load for me. I'm on the home stretch, and now the pages don't want to load for me. All right, here we go. You know what? I don't think it's that one. Just give me 1 second, guys. I'm trying to figure out where my parts were. Where's the important information? Was it not this one? I think I have actually. Oh, okay. Here it is. Here it is. Sorry, guys. It was the wrong links I was thinking of, but I found the one I'm looking for now. Just going to quickly go to the chat while this loads, and then we'll read this last little bit. Concan, we should never have a target for immigrants. We should be taking as few as possible and only the ones who fit in and get the job. Sounds like the protocol of Zion. That's from Kim Cater. You know what? Actually, there's probably some relation to what you're talking about there, Kim, about the protocols of Zion, because if you think about it, uh, Israel is one of those countries that doesn't really take on immigrants, and they even like there's a lot of war that goes on there that can be considered that is started by Israel, which floods the European Union and which floods the Europe and America with a lot of these immigrants. And it's clear, what is clear too, is that a number of the ones that they do send over should not be sent in the first place. I mean, most recently we made an agreement where we were taking on the white helmets. Now, anybody who's done a little bit of research into the white helmets, they know that the white helmets are just they're just part of their own terrorist group. They're related to a bunch of them. I know the closest connection they have is to Al Nusra, and Al Nusra is pretty much just another association of Al Qaeda. Yet, and so if we know this, then clearly our governments know this, but they're still allowing them to come over, and we're going to resettle them. So yeah, I think you do have a point when you bring that up. All right, so this last one that I have here is imperialism, migration agenda. Who is funding the refugee transport to Europe? Australian intelligence officials have reportedly revealed that U.S. government agencies are paying for the transport of migrants to Europe. On August 5th, 2015, Austrian magazine Info Direct reported, it has come to the knowledge that U.S. organizations are paying for the boat taking thousands of refugees to Europe. U.S. organizations have created a co-financing scheme that which provides for a considerable portion of transportation costs. Not every refugee from North Africa has €11,000 cash. Nobody is asking, where's the money coming from? French government officials have also been caught selling lifeboats to refugees in Turkey. France's France 2 television station filmed French honorary proconsul François Oquet in Turkey in flagrant delicto. When the official was asked if she was aware that her actions were illegal, she indicated that there were hundreds of Turkish officials involved. Aforementioned KTV has also revealed that private multinational project management companies such as the ORS services have been making millions of euros from the plight of refugees. In 2014, ORS services received 21 million euros from the German government and has been seen profits doubling since the refugee crisis. The Austrian newspaper Hute, I think it's called Hute, reported that ORS made 21 million euro this year alone from the migrant crisis. Shareholder finance of ORS Services is managed by the private equity firm Equistone Partners Europe, an affiliate of the Rothschild-owned Barclays Bank, which is considered to be the most influential financial institution in the world. German economist Wolfgang Friesleben has described Barclays Bank as the Rothschild slaughter ship. Barclays is the most important shareholder in both NM Rothschild Bank and Lazard Brothers. Former director of Barclays, Marcus Agius, is married to a daughter of Edmund de Rothschild. Agius is also director of British Broadcasting Corporation's executive board and served in the steering committee of the secretive Bilderberg Group. As in the case of the Arab Spring, which anarchists are once again unwitting tools and fools in the imperialist subversion, Berliner anarchist collective Peng is helping to smuggle immigrants into Europe illegally. This is part of the group's international solidarity. The organization is funded by ultra-right wing and Rand Institute, which director is Israeli and Zionist ideologue Yaron Brooks. A key weapon used in 2011 by imperialism to destroy the institution of the nation-state was the smartphone. Thousands of smartphones were provided to U.S.-funded activists during Zionism's Arab Springs. It was unsurprising, therefore, to see that smartphones are being supplied to thousands of migrants by NGOs once they arrive in Europe. This could have been a nightmare for any nation-state refusing to cooperate with imperialism migration agenda. Research in Germany found that migrants were being supplied with smartphones by Austria's A1 mobile phone company. The A1 mobile company is controlled by Mexican billionaire Carlos Slim. Slim, whose real name is Salem, comes from Levant. Billionaire George Soros has advised the European Union to increase funding to NGOs and the private sector dealing with the refugee crisis. It looks like Brussels is following his advice with the fund put aside to deal with the crisis, now doubling to 9.5 billion euro. Good news for Ecostone Partners Europe, the Rothschild banking mafia. Jewish humanitarian agencies such as Multi-Faith Alliance for Syrian Refugees and Jewish Coalition for Syrian Refugees in Jordan, who have no interest in the plight of millions of Palestinian refugees of Zionism, have actually offering Syrians of Jordanian camps resettlement in Europe and America. And that's actually something I was talking about that we had when we had the Syrians first come to Canada, is that a number of them came from Jordanian camps, but this is where Justin Trudeau picked them up from. So why did they end up getting moved from these Jordanian camps all the way to Canada when being in Jordan was actually an area that they would have had more connection to? People around there shared similar culture, similar religion, similar language, but instead they ended up getting brought over to Canada, which is completely different. I mean, if something happened here in Canada or America, we'll take Canada as the example for now, would you rather then get settled in America, or would you rather get picked up and settled in Saudi Arabia? Which one are you going to be more comfortable with? Which one are you going to be better with? It's the same sort of idea. What Syrians manipulated by Israeli agencies fail to realize is that these same agencies are responsible not only for the destruction of their country, but they could soon be joined in Jordan by Palestinians deported by Israel. Other reports in German media indicate that the German state will have to dish out $46 billion per annum to finance immigration. So this one is pretty telling. This one was actually, when I kind of came across it, was probably the meatiest one, and I actually wish I had brought it up earlier. I kind of got lost amongst all the tabs that I had. All the different articles that I had available to me. So I'm glad I could find it and sort of read it out before I sign off. But it's kind of saying a lot about what we're facing right now. And the one thing that I've noticed too is it kind of talks about cell phones actually, and how many of the people are giving cell phones. I've also noticed that a lot of the people that are crossing our border at Roxham Road, they too are also having pretty nice cell phones, pretty nice luggage, pretty nice clothing. But the one thing I've noticed is that a lot of them have pretty advanced cell phones. I mean, my cell phone is 4 years old, maybe 5 years old by now. I know my wife's is something similar. It's probably about 4 years old. So these people who are considering themselves asylum seekers and migrants are coming across the border with newer equipment than some citizens have. And I just thought that's really weird. I've been thinking that's weird, but just this article, when I saw it and it was talking about the providing cell phones, it seems to make more sense now. So I think that's all I have for you all today, which is probably about right. We're pushing close to the 2-hour mark. And so I hope that I was able to inform everybody about everything. And for those who stuck around, sorry about for the first few minutes I had my mic muted. When this is made, when the stream finally comes public after I sign off, I'm going to delete the part where I was talking without the mic on, because that's about 3 or 4 minutes of unnecessary air. But I hope I was able to inform some people about what's going on. I hope some people learned something, and you kind of learned a little more about who's financing you. So I want to thank you all for joining me on the podcast today. I'm Adrian Lloyd. This is Just My Stupid Opinion.